Thanks. And as Andy steps forward, I'd like to invite all of you who are thinking of questions to start moving towards either this microphone or that microphone over there. Thanks.
So Ma Jun has presented a really inspiring example and model of how to work in the situation in China. So I want to first of all make a comment that developing participation and transparency in China is a very, very challenging task, and many different movements have tried to do so. The public health movement, the pro-democracy movement, land seizure issues. Many people with many issues have tried to do it, but I think that Ma Jun has been the most successful in that particular environment in developing transparency and participation to the highest point that civil society has done so far. Now, obviously, this is politically very sensitive and risky. So one of the questions that we might ask is, why is it possible to do this around the issue of the environment? I think the answers are complicated, but some of the things that he has told us illuminate that. He's working with a priority of the central government. He's using government data. He's serving a public interest. At the same time, there's a deep well of public dissatisfaction around this environment issue. He's drawing upon that. So I just want to highlight kind of the way the model works within the Chinese situation. And invite any more comment you might have, because this is obviously risky. It has, from the government's point of view, its risky side if it gets out of control. So you must sometimes hear messages from authorities saying, don't carry this beyond some certain point. Second question, a question, maybe first question, that may not be a question, but a question is, your model relies a lot on the data from the national and local environmental protection agencies of China. These are relatively new, relatively weak organizations that are even more than you are able to be influenced by. They're more likely than you to receive messages from local government saying, don't do this report because it's going to hurt us. How good are the reports that you're putting up on your website? How satisfied are you with those reports? Another question I want to ask is, the government agencies from time to time come to you and say, don't embarrass this particular enterprise because we need the jobs. This relates to a generic issue about environmental protection, which is that it costs money. It hurts people's other human rights because it slows down economic development. How do you answer? I'm not saying I believe it, but I'm saying it's an argument that's often made. How do you answer? Do you get into that argument when they come to you and say, we need the jobs? Do you tell them, well, it's costing you more than it's worth? Or do you just say, I don't care about the jobs, I'm only interested in the environment? Finally, I'd like to raise the following question. We often hear that China's ahead of the United States and this, that, and the other thing, and they're going to rule the world. Seems like your organization is ahead of us in promoting Make a Green Choice for the Future methodology of mobilizing society. And I wonder if you have any comments for how we can advance your model into the promotion of environmental issues outside of China. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, for all these insights and comments and questions. You have to remind me of some of the questions you asked. I got really, but let me start it by saying that we do have some different contexts in China, so we have to put it in mind. And I think the number one challenge we are having in China is there's a huge gap of trust between the NGOs and some of the most important stakeholders. The government is one of them, business is the other. Now our number one challenge is how to bridge that gap. It's never easy. But as an NGO, we decided that there are several things that we could work on which could help that build up the trust. I mean, one of that is stick to the target, stick to the goals. You know, there are all these different kind of temptations here and there, but we stick to the environmental target. That's our legitimacy, and we're going to start it. We're going to stick to that, and this is an important aspect. So, and secondly, we try to be professional. Try to understand what we're talking about. It's very, very important. That will give you some further legitimacy. It's extremely important in China. And then third part is try to be collaborative. Try to not to surprise. Always surprise everyone. Try to keep everyone some updated about, before you leap, make a major leap. For example, that index we did with NRDC, we did kind of consult a little bit beforehand, saying that NGOs had never done that, obviously, before to assess the performance of government. So could we do something like that? And the message, is that not from the government itself, but from those who can, better read through that. And they kind of say, look, you could do that, but do it in a quantitative way rather than a qualitative way. Everything got to come out of a kind of a calculation based on some complicated formulas. Otherwise, we won't accept that. Every kind of score you make, you got to give me a quantitative reason behind that. So, but thanks to all this work, every day we're collecting all this data. Every year we got some 15,000 records of violations. So based on that, we could check who are disclosing what in how timely way, whether it's comprehensive, the integrity of the data, and all this. So user friendliness. So we developed this matrices to do that, and they kind of accepted that. They actually came to our launching ceremony, launch of each year's report, and we organized all this training, to share best practice. So that's how we, in some way move forward. I think you also try to ask about the data quality. The quality, I would say, is troublesome. In China, not just environmental data, but all the data, there. This way or that way, have some gaps there. But I happen to believe that if they say, all this, half of our waterways are badly polluted, and then if they say, more than a quarter of our major cities cannot meet the modest air quality standards. If they say, 12 million tons of food crops contaminated by heavy metals, I think that's, good enough, at least for us, to try to mobilize our people. Say, look, everyone agree with this, and rather than ending up into a kind of academic, conceptualized, kind of debate, those are very important, but we can start from here. That's, one of the reasons that we made this huge compromise from day one to stick to government-sourced data. Because we, as an organization, started with 3 people. We don't have the capacity to verify each case. We want to give a fair say to all the companies we listed there. But then we can guarantee that we are accurate on the data source. The source are clearly logged, and it's an open source data. You are openly accused of breaking the Chinese law, and do you own the public kind of a response to that? You can make self-defense. No problem. We can run that. But most of them came here. They choose to explain what went wrong, how they try to fix their problem. Sometimes probably those bad polluters, they should have 10 kind of a penalty fines each year, but they only ended up having 1, or kind of. But I kind of believe over the past 6, 7, 8 years, if it is a real bad polluter in putting into our situation now with these legal requirements for this monitoring and disclosure, they can't hide that forever. They can't cover it up to all the people. They can cover that for a while to some people, but can't forever. So sooner or later, we're going to got them there. And we use that as an entry point to engage those major stakeholders. Today started with brands, but in the future, investors and bankers and other, many other ways we could engage with them. Remind me of the other questions if you have. Truly appreciate it.
I'm going to start with the questions over there. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are filming this evening, so we're encouraging free speech, but just remember, don't say anything you wouldn't want your grandmother to hear. If your grandmother watches YouTube. Let's start over here.
I want to introduce myself first. My name is Song Jing. I come from All China Environment Federation. Now I am the visiting scholar in Columbia Law School, focused on the environmental law and human rights. I have a question about Director Ma. It's about the transparency, because in the environmental legal practice in China, we have a feeling is that if we want to request for the environmental information from the central government, it's easier. And when we request the information from the environmental protection agency on the province level, it's a little easy, but difficult, more difficult than the central government. But when we request for some information from the local, especially the environmental protection agency in the county level, it's most difficult. So I know your organization did very well in this aspect. So could you give my organization some advice to deal with this problem? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that's an important question. I think China developed its first open government information regulation. The State Council issued that in 2008, and then followed with environmental information disclosure measures, which also, all this for the first time laid the kind of a legal framework for the citizens to go to the government to seek for data. Now, before, it's not possible. There's no legal basis for that, but there are some work going on. But after this, it is possible, and it's also part of our indicators in our pollution index, transparency index. We every year actually going to send our letters to require all this data from the 113 cities by ourselves to try to test whether it works or not. So that helped us to build some engagement. And we found that, as you said, it's not easy. It's still not quite easy. If we are talking about requirement for proactive disclosure, China is actually not, it's not, but it's quite ahead, because it's, we could see that, the proactive disclosure require for confirm the public petition records. I don't know even in this country it exists, but in China that's a requirement. But the real gap is on disclosure upon request. I mean, because in many parts of the world you can request for that, and the government have a legal duty to give it to you. But in China, the implementation of that is still quite problematic. I should say on our side, we required for something, the list of violators. This is something that they proactively should disclose, but they haven't. So, or they did or haven't. So it's slightly easier for our question. But if you ask for something which will be considered as more sensitive, then it's actually quite difficult. We also have that experience. I don't know how this could be, at this moment to be resolved, because I do look into our regulation and measures and find, unfortunately, the legal relief part is not there. If they don't give it to you, I mean, who should you go to try to force them to do that? That part, I think we need to do some more work to improve that legislation. But by simply asking for this data, in some way, it's already helpful, because some of the EPBs in China, Environmental Protection Bureau, they got troubled by our request for data, all this time, and saying that, why do you keep asking this thing? And so what about others? They all disclose this? I said, yes, many of them actually started doing that. Look at your neighbors kind of outperform you because they do that. So they said, okay, hold on. And then for a few days, even my city, the capital city of Beijing, Only after this, they started throwing all this data on internet, saying that don't bother us, it's all there, just give you a link. So there are quite a few cases like this. So I still encourage you to try that, but we need to, still, go very steady with that.